Hello everyone, this is Mr. Obvious, bringing you the obvious. Yeah. Woo! Booyah! Hello everyone. Today we're on W Magazine to read this hilarious article. And I do mean it's hilarious. Here it says, Game of Thrones keeps killing off entire immigrant populations. And it's a problem. First off, look at the resolution of this picture. Like, this is shameful. You want people to visit your website? You want people to take you seriously? Get a higher resolution image or make it smaller? I mean, wow. By Kyle Moonzindrider. That is actually a really awesome sounding name. Is that German? On last night's Game of Thrones, the priestess, Melisandre, sauntered in at the last possible minute to light up the Arrax of the Dothraki in flames. It offered both the assembled forces of Winterfell and the audience at home a brief glimmer of hope before the next 60 or so minutes of horror film meets battle scene tension. Really? No. It was just a war against the undead. I wouldn't call that horror like a horror mashup or anything. And did you guys notice how dumb the leadership and general ability of the Dragon Queen actually was? You don't send in your cavalry first, and you certainly don't send them to the front lines. They only use the what are they called? Trebuchences? They only use the catapults for a little bit. What they should have done was held back. They should have kept firing. First off, you fire the catapults. You keep firing them. As they get closer, you fire the arrows. And then you meet as they charge. You would have saved yourself a lot of trouble. The Dothraki, yeah, I do agree. The Dothraki got obliterated for no reason and resulted in a clever cinematic trick. The swift extinguishing of that flame, like a city skyline experiencing a rolling blackout, telegraphed the pure carnage that awaited without zooming in on the details. Narratively, however, it also literally represented the end of what was left of Daenerys' 100-plus Dothraki horde. Presumably, there are the women and children and possibly a few rogue hordes of Dothraki still left in Essos. But unless the show pulls a trick of, oh, we actually have some more Dothraki over there, you just couldn't see them. It was dark. This may have been their send-off from the show. It was an abrupt end to an entire group whom we were introduced to in the very first episode, and a people we've spent more time with and understand better than many of the populations of the actual Seven Kingdoms. What is even happening in, say, the Reach lately? And it points to a worrying problem. And this is where the article loses its mind. This is definitely a leftist that wrote this. I don't think I need a guess to be right about that. Where once it seemed like Game of Thrones had something to say on the topic of immigration and the introduction of new populations to the staid old continent of Westeros, I'm no longer sure it's interested in such heady ideas anymore. It continues to burn up entire ethnicities, like kindling in the fire of expensive battle scenes, revealing that it only introduced them in the first place to populate its numerous bloodbaths. Entire peoples with proud, interesting histories have been given the send-off at a random red shirt cadet in Star Trek. So, this person's literally complaining that fictional characters, fictional immigrants, keep dying in Game of Thrones. Well, I've got some news for you. Everyone dies in Game of Thrones. It's kind of its thing. And have you ever noticed how the left constantly confuses fiction with reality? Oh, you know the type. They'll say stuff like, Trump is Voldemort, right? And Hillary Clinton is Harry Potter. And then they'll say stuff like, Anderson Cooper's like Dumbledore. It really doesn't end. They confuse fiction and reality. It's the cringiest thing ever. Can you imagine being such a shallow NPC? Like being so soulless that you take popular fiction, not even good fiction, just whatever's popular, and you ingrain it in your personality. That's why Marvel fans are so cringy sometimes. The only Marvel fans I really respect are the ones who actually read the comics. I enjoy the films. They're not the best. I happen to think that the first part with Thanos, that movie, that was a great movie. I think that subverted the genre. That deserves an award, in my opinion. It was really good. It was a battle of philosophy. It had meaning. But most of the films aren't that good. I mean, you have something like Ragnarok. That was a lot of fun. So that was a fun movie. Game of Thrones first started teasing that it had something big to say about the impact of borders on humans with the wildlings, or as they prefer to be known, the free folk. I really don't think that there was any meaning there. No hidden meaning. There's no political message in Game of Thrones. Okay, I know the TV show likes to spin it that way. Like they actually paint, what's her name? Daenerys? The Dragon Queen? They actually paint her like she's some sort of symbol of female empowerment. Oh, she's a hero. Oh, she's so cool. Oh, she's freeing everyone. No. Daenerys is a genocidal, sociopathic maniac who's exactly like the Mad King. Let's think about the things she's done, okay? She literally burned her own brother. Was it her brother or relative or whatever? She burned him alive with like liquid gold and presumably killed him. Murdered him in cold blood. Yeah, he was kind of a douche. Yeah, he sold her off to be married. Yeah, that marriage actually worked out, didn't it? It did. It worked out. It literally worked out. And she had a good husband. And then what does she do? Right? She wants to be liberal and she wants to save all the poor people that you conquer, you know? So she saves a witch. The witch curses her husband and he dies. Her fault. And then what does she do? Later on, where she's just like an ex-wife in the Dothraki group, she locks a bunch of men who are having an important meeting because she joins up with the feminists of the group, you know, girl power, and she burns them all alive. They didn't deserve that. They really didn't. They're leaders. They were doing the Dothraki way. But, you know, feminism and girl power and all that, it justifies, genocide. It justifies it. What if the situation was reversed and it was a dude, like, burning a bunch of women? Do you really think that would fly in modern society? Because it's so gynocentric? I don't think so. The group was hated by many in Westeros, simply because they had been hated for years. It was tradition, and while we now know there was actually a very good reason why the wall had gone up in the first place, most of the characters in the show didn't believe that White Walkers and other assorted supernatural threats beyond the wall existed. Most of them had come to believe that the wall was simply there to keep the free folk out. The show then spent several seasons humanizing the free folk. The free folk were human to begin with. You see the delusion here? I legitimately think that these NPCs, these people primarily on the left, I think there's something wrong with their brains. I think they have trouble discerning what's in their head from what's real, and that's why they confuse fiction and reality. It would explain a lot about their psychology and why they're so emotional. They think the emotions are like real life. Tracking the piece they eventually come up with, the Northerners, and exposing century bigotries as nonsense in the process. No, the free folk and the people at the wall, they were at war. They would regularly attack and fight each other. That's probably why, oh, and yeah, to top it off, the free folk are raiders, so that's probably why they were hated. Of course, I'm pro free folk, but it's understandable. And that's the biggest thing. This is gonna go on about how, this is a parallel to real life, and we shouldn't be mean to foreigners. Let me make something clear. The Dragon Queen, the free folk, all of them are literally foreign invaders, especially Daenerys. She came from across the ocean to steal a throne. It doesn't matter how you spin it, even if she is the rightful heir. She's invading, killing, pillaging, destroying villages. She burned a man and his son alive because they wouldn't bend the knee. She's a tyrant. Didn't she free a city, quote unquote, the city that had the masters and the slaves, and she freed the slaves? And what did they do? I don't know if I'm remembering this correctly, but didn't they just enslave the masters? Didn't the whole society collapse into chaos? She's dumb. She's so dumb. The Dragon Queen is dumb. She's a tyrant. She's a sociopath. I don't like her. If that's an example of feminism and girl power, then wow, they must actually be insane. Indeed, some of the biggest, purest romantic storylines on the show were between the free folk and Westeros citizens. Cuckery just bleeds out of these people's pores, doesn't it? It wasn't hard to see the show grappling with what Westeros would look like if it came to recognize the free folk as equals. An Eighth Kingdom, perhaps? A spot on the small council? Wow, yeah, just give political power to foreigners. That's a great idea. In some ways, the show might still attempt that, but it's not like it has many free folk left to work with. The only major named free folk who are still alive are Tuamund, Giantsbane, I love that guy, Gilly, and baby Samwell. How much of the population is left beyond that is up for debate. Most of them now have been killed at least twice on the show, first by the White Walkers and then as whites. Then there are the Unsullied. We're to assume that there's at least a good chunk of them that have somehow survived the long night and will fight in the upcoming last war, but it's not entirely clear if the show has any larger plan for them outside of dudes who will die for Daenerys. Granted, that's about half the show's cast at this point, but still. The reason that all of Daenerys' army keeps being killed and that people die around, like, everywhere she goes, is because she's inept. She's a terrible leader, and she's dumb. Her army is bleeding. But what does she do? We gotta fight in the next war. We gotta take the throne. Because that's all she cares about is sitting on that throne. She doesn't care how many people die. She's a horrible leader. Grey Worm is by far their most prominent member. And should Daenerys sit on the throne, I would be totally fine with Jon Snow claiming his rightful place on the throne. Because he is a true Targaryen. But what I think the show should do at this point is just have Jon Snow marry Daenerys, and then they sit on the throne together. He is the rightful king, and he's a way better character, and he's not a sociopath. He's actually a good person. No, I'm not saying that I wouldn't personally use Daenerys' methods, but I'm just pointing out that she is in fact a sociopath. He and Missandei, another Essos native, though the only Noth native featured on the show, could very well become a Westeros power couple. You have to figure Grey is on the short list for leader of the Queensguard, and Missandei a candidate for a small council seat. Yet should they survive, they already decided they want to retire back to the beach, a Missandei's native Noth. From a character perspective, that's nice for them, but thematically, unless they change their minds, it means two of the most potentially powerful post-war characters have placed themselves outside of the answer of what would a Westeros with immigrants in positions of power would look like. Oh my god. The level of delusion. It's too much for me. First of all, they're not a power couple. Second of all, they're not leaders, okay? The dude's a warrior. The woman is just like an advisor. Honestly, she's basically just a professional, I can't even say secretary. I don't know what she is, but she's not a leader. Why would she have any power? Why would they have any power? Why do you want the immigrants to be in positions of power so much? How cucked are you? Seriously, it's just pure delusion. It's pure delusion. It's odd because not only have so many outsiders died to protect the people of the Seven Kingdoms, no, they died to protect themselves from the Night Walkers who would destroy everyone. So I'm actually a little bit salty about how that ended. I don't dislike Arya. What people need to remember is that the author's wife basically forced him to keep Arya alive because that's her favorite character, and she said, "I'll divorce you if you let her die." So he's forced to keep her alive. She has plot armor, and well, he has to write her into the story now, and that's just how it is. What I think is Jon Snow was supposed to have fought the Night King. I think he was supposed to win. But it was retconned because of his wife. It's odd because not only have so many outsiders died to protect the Seven Kingdoms, but some of the most prominent characters have foreigners to thank for skills, experiences, and magic they learned from both Essos and the Free Folk. So it sits a bit awkwardly that there are very few Free Folks or immigrants from Essos left to share in the rewards and the power structure that emerges afterward. Okay. Given a few thousand more years, maybe the White Walkers, had they survived, could have figured out how to man boats, or at least fly an ice dragon over Essos. But for the most part, so many people died for a threat their people didn't directly face. Yeah, that's what happens when you join an army. That's what happens when you're enslaved. That's what happens when you bend the knee. I would never bend the knee to Daenerys. I would shank that woman faster than you can say exactly. Though I might just bang her. She cannot be trusted. She just can't. She'll kill anyone who gets in her way. Is she really any different from Cersei? When you get right down to it, no, she's exactly the same. This may also be a result of the show getting ahead of the books. The author George R.R. Martin has suggested that ultimately, he's more interested in exploring what the victors do with their power and responsibilities after they win a war than he is in the war itself. His future books may imagine what a free folk run 8th Kingdom would look like. No, they won't. Or what would happen if some Dothraki survived and decided they had every right to bring their wives and children over and set up a new home within the Seven Kingdoms. No, actually, they'd probably just want to go home. It makes sense that the HBO show killed off the Horde. Literally a horde, huh? Yeah, actually, the whole Game of Thrones shows you exactly why immigration is bad. Okay? Foreign invasion is bad. The Night Walkers were foreign invaders. You needed a wall to keep them out. And as soon as you let them in, they started killing everyone. That's actually, the message of Game of Thrones, yeah, it's not pro-migration. It literally shows all of the problems of foreign invasion. Okay, because it made a great visual spectacle, but the literary version would find more satisfying material to answer that question of what would become of the surviving Dothraki. The show could still find a way to address some of these themes and questions that once seemed so central. Unfortunately, it's killed off so many immigrants and foreigners that it's left itself very little to work with. This is such a soy-filled article. Like the cuckery, the lameness of this article, I swear. Okay, yeah, it's not a problem. It's not a problem at all that Game of Thrones has killed off all the foreigners. Because I've already explained that. It's the Dragon Queen's ineptitude. Okay? She literally thinks she's a savior, but at the end of the day, she's just another tyrant. Sure, that's totally my style, but it's not, you can't call that a good person. You really can't. Jon Snow's a good man. Better man than I'll ever be. I honestly think he's the best candidate for king, and he's the rightful heir to the throne. Daenerys is insane. She would make a really good crazy wife, though. So I really think that Jon Snow should just marry her. Yeah? They just have kids. But Mr. Obvious, what about the incest? Well, as we all know, that just makes it better. But that's merely the obvious. Well, that's all for now, folks. What do you think about this article? Do you think Game of Thrones has an immigration problem? Do you think it's a bad thing? What are your thoughts on the Dragon Queen? Be sure to let me know. Now, if you like my content and would like to support the work I do, you can do so by joining me on Patreon, Subscribestar, or donating through PayPal. As always, thanks for watching. This has been Mr. Obvious, and I'll see you all next time.